Hi everyone, this is Ryan coming to you today with our webinar on time ownership. It's not just about getting more things done, it's about making sure we're getting the right things done. So that's what we'll talk about today. We'll start off with a little strategy, get into some tactics. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. So, if you're like me, you probably remember some Monday mornings that felt like this. In fact, your Monday mornings still may feel like this. And if they do, that's okay. You're at the right place. This is exactly what we'll be talking about today, exactly what we'll be working to solve. So you may say, Ryan, well, what do you know about time management, time ownership? Well, at one point in my life, it was an absolute necessity. In fact, a few years ago when I really got serious about studying time management, how could I get more things done? How could I get the right things done? I was swamped. I was busy. At the time, I owned and ran 3 different companies. I had 2 young children, 2 little girls. My wife worked full time. I was on the Chamber of Commerce board and various committees. I was on a nonprofit banking board. My wife is Catholic and I'm not, so we go to my church on Sunday mornings, her church on Sunday night, and I'm on my church board and run the audio visual there. Multiple peer groups. I traveled a lot. My wife and I built a house out in the country, so I have a beautiful 10-acre yard that I keep up, and so plenty of stuff to do. And that's when I realized I had to get some help. I had to figure out what was going on because I just, like you, I said all the time, I don't have enough time. And I said that for years. In fact, I still hear friends and clients say that today. And while I used to say it, now it frustrates me. When I hear people say it now, it frustrates me because you know what? Time is the great leveler. Everyone on our planet has the same amount of time. I tell people sometimes, I say, what do you have in common with this guy? Yeah, Bill Gates. What do you have in common with Bill Gates? You both have 24 hours in a day. The difference is how you use it. And so that's what we'll talk about today, how to get strategic to begin with, and then tactically, what are some of the tools that we'll use to help us become better with our time. Another one of my favorite sayings, instead of saying I don't have time, try saying it's not a priority and see how that feels. That's true. It's not that we don't have enough time. It's that we've sometimes tried to overload ourselves with too many things. And if we can prioritize, if we can get the most important things first, if we can get those on our plate first, then you'd be amazed at how much you really can accomplish. In fact, there was a study a while back from Harvard. I think this was in the 1970s. And the study was, they were looking for a single predictor of success. They said, is there one thing that we can look at, that we can track in people to determine if they'll be successful? And they started with children, and they watched these children, they measured and studied these children for decades. And what they found was that, yes, there is one thing, one single trait that is the best predictor of success at an early age, and that is what they call long-time perspective. In other words, if you could look at an item, an obstacle, an issue today, and think about the consequences of that thing a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, you are much more likely to be successful. And they started their study with children. They gave the children one donut. Each child got one donut. And they said, okay, if you can wait 5 minutes before you eat that donut, you'll get an extra donut. So in other words, you could jump in and eat the donut now, but if you could just wait 5 minutes, you'd have 2 donuts. And what they found is that those children who dove in and ate one donut, they were kind of immediate gratification. But those who waited and were able to get a second donut, those children later became more successful because they had a long time perspective. Imagine you're in college and it's Thursday night. You've got a big test on Friday morning. And in my college days, Thursday night was always one of the biggest partying nights. So the question is, do I go out to this party tonight, or do I stay home, study a little while, get a good night's sleep, and get ready for my test in the morning? And if you have a short time perspective, you're hitting that party. If you have a long time perspective, you're going to think about that and think about how will this affect my grade, and that will affect my graduation, and that might affect my future job, and that would affect future goals beyond that. So long-time perspective is one thing that we need to think about. And think about that as we talk today. We talk about strategy. What do I want to ultimately achieve, and how do my actions today affect that? So now let's talk a little bit about what to do versus how to do it. I've seen people before get very good at getting things done. In fact, I was like this. I was the to-do list champion. I could knock out 50 or 60 things off a to-do list in a day. But that didn't mean I was necessarily getting the right things done. I was efficient, but was I being very effective? My wife and I, we recently went to Albuquerque. We were there for a long weekend. And while we were there, we wanted to climb or go to the top of this mountain. And so we rented a car. We leave the hotel that morning. We're driving towards the mountain. We can see it. And as we were talking and driving, I was following the GPS. And pretty soon I noticed that the GPS had us take a left. And so we're chatting, and we're in a nice rental car, and it's getting great gas mileage. No one's on the road. No, it's early in the morning, so there's no traffic. We're making great time. And as we chatted, I looked up and realized that the mountain was in our rearview mirror. So I was being very efficient. I was driving at a good speed, no traffic on the road. We're making good time, but I was going in the wrong direction. I had taken a wrong turn, and so I was being very efficient, but not very effective. So as we go through our webinar today, think about that. Are we being effective and efficient? That's the ultimate goal. Another great point, people do what they want. So we've got to find our why. In other words, why do you want to do what you want to do? If you can find your why, it'll make all the difference in the world. If you say, I want to be a millionaire. Okay, that's not a bad goal. In fact, I think that's a great goal for everyone to have. But is that really motivating for you? Now, if you can say, why do you want to be a millionaire? Maybe you want to be a millionaire so you can buy your parents that dream house they always wanted but never could afford. That's a much more motivating why as just thinking, hey, I just want $1 million in the bank to have $1 million in the bank. So find your why. That's one of the things we'll be talking about today. How do we find our why? And one of the best ways I've found is a system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. I found this system years ago, used it to run my businesses and used it to run my life. And it excels in many things. In fact, it can help you run every aspect of your business. But finding your why is one of the best. So when we talk about EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, this is kind of where we start. We call this our EOS model. I'll just very briefly touch on this. Today, we'll mostly be talking about the vision component at the top and the traction component at the bottom. In fact, I feel so strongly about this. I've made it a career. I help other people, other businesses use EOS to run their businesses. So one of the first things that we talk about when we're meeting is our vision. In other words, why do we want what we want? What do we want? Why do we want it? How do we get there? So when we talk about vision, we start with a simple business planning process we call the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. It's 8 simple questions. I wrote my first business plan almost 20 years ago. And it was 66 pages. It was long and beautiful and formatted, and it was really a pretty sight to behold, but it was absolutely useless. It sat on my shelf collecting dust for the next decade. I don't think I ever looked at it once. That was not the point of a business plan, but I didn't know any better. And oftentimes I find that with clients now. If they've done any business planning, it's some monstrous document that they never look at. And the beauty of EOS is that we've taken that giant 66-page business plan and pared it down to 8 simple questions. And these questions can fit on literally 2 sheets of paper. I used to print it on the front and back of 1 page. And by answering these 8 questions, we can get clear on where we're going and how we're going to get there. So let's run through this real briefly. The first of the 8 questions are core values. What are our core values? In other words, who are we as a company? The next is core focus. This is what we do. This is where it really comes in handy when we're talking about what are the most important things to us. We really can start focusing on what do we do, what can we be best at in the world. Then we pick that 10-year target. That's that mountain in the distance that we're climbing towards. It gives us and everyone in our company a clear point to aim for. It's extremely important. So our core values, that's who we are. Our core focus, that's what we do. Our 10-year target, that's where we're going. Now our marketing strategy, that's how we're going to get there. Kind of the plan to help us hit that 10-year target. Then after a marketing strategy, we jump into what we call our 3-year picture. Sometimes people say, Ryan, why do we need a 3-year picture? Well, it's hard to make a mental leap from a 10-year target, that mountain in the distance, to what I need to be working on right now today. And the 3-year picture helps us begin to make that mental leap. It kind of helps us bridge the gap between the 10-year and where we are now. So we work on a 3-year picture. What do we want? What will we achieve in the next 3 years? Then we flip the page to the other side of our Vision Traction Organizer, and we jump into our 1-year plan. In other words, we've made a crystal clear 10-year target. We've got a great 3-year picture. Now, how do we use that 3-year to help us get really crystal clear on where we're going in a year? Once we have our year set, our goals for the year, then we can work down to 90 days. What do we need to do in the next quarter? And we set these 90-day goals, these big tasks that we call rocks. Once we have our rocks in place, life gets better. That's what we need to be doing right now in the next 90 days. We can use these rocks to help us determine what do I need to be doing this week and what do I need to be doing today and right now. So this is a beautiful process that we go backwards from 10 years to 3 to 1 to 90 to right now. So our last section of the VTO is our issues. This is where we capture all the obstacles and opportunities that pop up in business, and we have a process to help us solve those. But this is the beginning, kind of the Vision Traction Organizer, the beginning of finding our why, the beginning of laying out the steps, the strategy for how we know what we need to do. Because so many times I see clients that come in, they spend their days fighting fires. And if we just fight fires all the time, we're always in this reactive mode. We'll never make progress on our big issues, our big goals, our big desires, our big wants. This is how we start to do this. In addition to this Vision Traction Organizer, which is great for your business, there's also a family version of this we call the family plan. Because listen, time management, time ownership, it's very important in our business life. It's also important in our personal lives. Where do you want to go personally? You know, I have a client, we started going through this Vision Traction Organizer, and in 15 months, they hit their 3-year picture. In other words, something that they thought they were going to have to really grasp and work hard and stretch for to hit it in 3 years, they worked hard, they focused, and they were able to hit that in 15 months. I have another client in just this last quarter. They did as much business in this last quarter as they did in the previous year. Because again, they focused on what was important. You'll hear me talk about that a lot today. Focus, focus, focus. One of the things we say, there was a book by Al Ries called Focus. In the book, he talked about the sun. You know, the sun is literally billions of kilowatts of energy. But what's the worst that happens if you go outside? You know, maybe you get a sunburn. That's the worst that can happen. But you know, what if you take just a few kilowatts and you focus them in a laser? Now, much less energy, but you can cut through diamonds. You can cut through steel because it's focused. So this is the power of focus, and this is what we're using our Vision Traction Organizer to do. We're focusing us, our whole team, our whole company on our long-term goals. So we can do the same thing with our family. We have a family version of this called the family plan. You know, in my own life, my wife and I wanted to make a trip overseas to see some friends of ours in Singapore, and we had talked about it for a while, but it never really materialized. Boom, we started planning it, we got it on our plan, and within less than a year, we were sitting in Singapore visiting our friends and family. So listen, this works. You can do it. I see it work with clients every day. So look for the Vision Traction Organizer. It will help you. One of the tools we use to make sure we're on track on a regular weekly basis is another tool called our scorecard. This is a weekly measurement of, are we doing the things that we need to do? Or is the business running well? So another great tool to help us make sure we're on track. Again, making sure we're being effective and efficient. So this is our scorecard. Jim Rohn, if you have not heard of Jim Rohn, he's one of the best goal setters, or was one of the best goal setters out there. He was a motivational speaker and he was phenomenal. So if you have not listened to or read any Jim Rohn books, I highly recommend them. He had a life planner that he recommended, basically a goal setting exercise. So again, Vision Traction Organizer is awesome for business and for family. Here's another variation of the same concept. This was Jim Rohn's. He basically said, take every major area of your life, you know, personal and spiritual, physical, family, economic, your career, your lifestyle, all these major areas of your life. And now think about, where do you want to be with each area in 10 years? In other words, 10 years from now, list 1 or 2 or 3 big goals for each of these areas. And once we have our 10-year, let's work backwards to a 5 and then a 3 and to a 1. And by doing that, we're forcing ourselves to think about what's important. Again, so many times we fight fires. We're always in this reactive mode. if we can keep this list in front of us, life will get better. You'll see some of these things. You'll be able to check them off your list. It's been proven that 36.6, you can increase your chance of hitting your goals by 36.6% just simply by writing them down. Here's another huge metric. If you write them down and then tell somebody, and that person can hold you accountable, that 36.6 goes up to 76%. So you can more than double your chances of hitting your goals by writing them down and sharing them with someone to hold you accountable, an accountability partner. If this is your family plan, it could be your spouse. If this is in business, it could be your business coach. It could be someone else in your business, a mentor. But write these down and share them with someone, and you will be much more likely to actually accomplish them. So again, we need to find our why. Another one of my favorite quotes by Henry Ford, it's been my observation that most people get ahead during the time that others waste. And I have found that to be true. Everyone talks about how busy they are. They're always running around like crazy. Well, we seem to still have time to watch TV and get on social media and go to the movies. We find plenty of time to do other things that aren't helping us achieve our long-term goals. Again, it comes back to priorities. What's important and what's not. So we've got to determine what's important to us. We've got to make sure that we're making progress on those. Next, we got to remember that all time's not created equal. Personally, I am a night owl. I work really well in the afternoons and the evenings and even late into the night. Most people are not like that. In fact, most successful people, and there have been plenty of studies and surveys done, most successful people say that they're sharpest early in the morning. So, I'll tell you, over the last few years, I've been training myself to get up earlier and to become more of a morning person. And it's not bad. In fact, I feel like I can get a lot more done now in the mornings than I used to. So all time is not created equal. Find out when your sweet spot is. When's the time that you are most productive? Again, for most people, it's early in the morning. So find your time and don't waste that time doing things that are not valuable. For example, if your sweet spot is 8 to 10 a.m., don't use that time checking email. Don't use that time reading books or things that are low priority. Now, if reading books are high priority to you, use that time for that. But use this time for your most critical thinking, working on your long-term goals and objectives. Whatever your most important work is, save it for this sweet spot, the time of your day when you are the most productive. Another one of my favorite sayings, he that would thrive must rise at 5. He that has thriven may lie till 7. And again, it goes back to getting up, getting a jump start on your day. I love the old, I think it was the old Army commercial that said, we get more done by 8 a.m. than most people get done all day. It's true. Let's get up. Let's get out of bed. Let's go to it. Let's do our hardest things first. Mark Twain always said, if your job's to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. If there's something hard, if there's something difficult, something important to do it first. I used to wait and save my toughest work until the end of the day. I would procrastinate, and 3 o'clock would roll around, 4 o'clock would roll around, and at 4 o'clock I'd say, I was supposed to call Bob. I really don't want to call Bob today. It's 4 o'clock. He's probably already gone. I'll just wait and do it tomorrow. And so I've dreaded calling him all day today. It's been in the back of my mind weighing down on me, and now I've just punted. I've kicked it until tomorrow, and so now I'll agonize over it all evening, all night, and probably tomorrow too. If I come in and I do this at 8 a.m. and get it out of the way, I don't agonize over it. I get it done, and I get on with the rest of my day. So if you've got something tough to do, do it first thing in the morning. Another one of my favorite books, if you haven't read this book, read it. It's called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. Again, it talks about how to get stuff done. Hal here has a great example of what to do in the morning, kind of a morning routine. He studied hundreds and hundreds of successful business people and found that most of them, on average, got up about 3 hours before their real work day began. In other words, if you have to be at work at 8, these folks would get up at 5. If you had to get up be at work at 9, they'd get up at 6 a.m. And so it's a process for getting up early. He's got some great tips and strategies. I use these to help me begin to become a morning person. And then he said, well, what do you need to do in the morning? Let's start off by meditating, praying. It's just spending a little while in silence. Then affirmations, talk to yourself. A lot of time, I think it was Napoleon Hill's best-selling business book of all time, Think and Grow Rich, over 100 million copies sold. It was about talking to yourself, affirmations. So think about that. The next is visualizing, thinking about your goals, where you want to be. Exercising, we got to get the blood flowing, get the exercise going. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then reading, develop your brain, develop your mind. We want to exercise our body and exercise our minds. And then finally, write, scribe, journaling. There have been entire books written on the value of journaling. So just spend a little while and just a few minutes every morning and just kind of write down your thoughts for the day, your thoughts from the night before. And if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend the book, The Miracle Morning, to help you jumpstart your day and help you become a morning person if you're not. Next, let's talk about Charles Schwab. So this is a picture of Charles Schwab. He was one of the richest people, actually I believe the richest person in America in the early 1900s. In about the year 1907, he owned a steel plant called Bethlehem Steel. And he was growing, his business was growing. He was at that point, becoming one of the richest people in America. And so he was looking for ways to get more done, to be more productive for him and his team. So he scoured the United States trying to find the best productivity experts. And he found a gentleman by the name of Ivy Lee. And he called Ivy Lee in. Ivy came in and they were talking, and Charles Schwab said, all right, me and my team, we have to get more productive. What's your biggest tip? What could you help us with to help us become more productive? And Ivy Lee said, okay, here you go. You ready? He said, take some notes. He said, what I'd like you to do is before you leave work today, just at the end of the day, before you leave, as you're wrapping up, take a piece of paper and write the 3 most important tasks that you have to accomplish tomorrow. That's it. Just write them down and then go home. When you come in tomorrow morning, start on the number 1 most important task and do it until it's done. Work on it until it's done. Don't swap tasks. Don't change and do something else. Work on number 1 until it is done. Once number 1 is completely done, then you can move to number 2, but not before. Work on number 2 until it's completely done. Then you can move to number 3. He said, do this every single day. If you don't finish, then simply pick up the next day where you left off. If you do finish, pick the next 3 most important things and start on those. But every day you should end the day with a list of what you'll be working on tomorrow. Charles Schwab was not very impressed. In fact, he was a little frustrated. And so he told Ivy Lee, he said, okay, whatever, how much do I owe you? And Ivy Lee said, don't worry about it right now. He said, use this tool I'm giving you. Use this for a few months. And if it's valuable, then we can talk about payment. Well, a few months go by. Charles Schwab ends up sending him a check for several $1,000s. At the time, it was more than a year's wages, because Charles Schwab said this was the single most beneficial tip he had ever received in his life. In fact, later, after he became the richest man in America, he said this was the single most productivity tip he had ever received. So think about that. It's about planning your day today, and coming in and focusing on the most important things and working on those until we get them done. So that's what we're talking about here, planning our days and our weeks ahead of time. We talked about that family plan, working with your family on a family plan. My wife and I have done that. We'll sit down sometimes on Sunday night when we get home from church, and we'll plan the next week, talk about who's going where, who's picking up the kids, who's getting groceries, who's going to be out of town that week. And I'll tell you, the week goes smoother. Communication is smoother. The household is more peaceful because we've planned our week ahead of time. So you can do that weekly. You can do that daily. You can even do that monthly. Plan your days and weeks ahead of time. Earlier, I said we'd come back to this, and we are now. So this is Richard Branson. He is one of the richest men in the world. I believe the last I heard, his business owned and operated more than 330 other businesses. So Richard's got his hands in everything. He was recently interviewed, and the interviewer asked, he said, Richard, what's the most important tip you could give us on success? In other words, what's the number 1 success tip you could give other entrepreneurs out there? And Richard Branson says, without a doubt, one thing, exercise. And you may say, really, that's it, exercise? Yes, exercise. It's been proven if you get up, exercise, especially early in the day, you kind of get your brain going, you get your blood flowing, you can think clear. In fact, I saw a study recently that said kids who took tests in school standing up got, I think it was an average of about 10% higher test grades because they were simply standing up. The blood was flowing better. So it's amazing how much better you can do when you're exercising, when you get that blood flowing. So exercise. If you're not exercising at least 3 times a week for 30 minutes a day, do that. Cardio is extremely important. So build time in. It's kind of one of these things, either you do it now or you do it later because the doctor tells you have to. So start now, build an exercise regimen, and start slow and work up to at least 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, which kind of rolls into taking care of ourselves in general. Take breaks. We can't just push 8, 10, 12 hours a day. You will burn yourself out. I'll tell you, at the end of a 12-hour day, if you try to cram in another hour or two, you will be so less productive than if you just go home, get a good night's sleep, and come back the next morning and start fresh. So take plenty of breaks. Take vacations. I'm shocked at how many Americans do not take their vacations. When I've owned my previous businesses, I would always have employees that would want to sell vacation time back at the end of the year because they hadn't taken it. And we need to take those breaks. You will feel better. Your life will be better and more peaceful. You'll be happier if you're taking these vacations. Get plenty of sleep. An old employee of mine, we used to joke around, who got the least amount of sleep, and he almost always won. I would think I could survive on 5 hours, and he would always come in with 3.5 or 4. And while it was possible that we were surviving on 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, we weren't at our peak efficiency. In fact, you can run a race car on regular 87 ethanol gas from the gas station down the road, but it's not going to be happy about it. It's not going to hit peak performance. It's not going to go as fast as it can unless it gets the right fuel. So when it comes to sleep and nutrition, we have to make sure we're eating right and we're getting plenty of rest if we really want to be most productive. So make sure you're doing those 2 things. And then lastly, while we're talking about that, ask yourself, do I have to be here in the office to get work done? The trend over the last decade or 2 has been more and more remote work. It's been proven in some cases, not all, but in some cases, to boost efficiency and productivity. So ask yourself, can I do some of the work that I do from a more relaxing location? Can you work from home? Could you travel a little bit more? Maybe take vacations a little more often if you had the ability to work remotely. So ask yourself, could I do some of the work that I normally would do away from my desk? The next tool we'll talk about is the Pareto principle. And again, we're talking about tools now. We're talking about tactics. How can we get more done? Like an old mentor of mine told me, she said, Ryan, if I hire you to cut my grass, I don't care if you use a lawnmower or a pair of scissors. I just want my grass cut. And so what I'm telling you is use these tools. Try them out and see what works. It doesn't matter to me what tools you use. All these tools I've tried. In some cases, I've had extreme success with them. In some, I've had minor success, but I've had some success with all of these tools. Use them, try them out, and see what works for you. Different tools work for different people, so I'm giving you a lot of options here. Again, these have worked in some capacity or another for me, but use them and find out what works best for you. This is a lot of information. I'll have some downloads available, a list of some of these tools. If it's too much and you don't know where to start, just pick 1 or 2 tools, 1 or 2 things that kind of spoke to you, and start there. And of course, always email me if you have any questions. So the next is the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. When we talk about that, we're talking about, keeping it simple. What's the 20% of the work that'll get us the 80% of our results? That's the Pareto principle. So ask yourself, the work that you do, what's generating the results? There's an old marketing saying that says, half my marketing's working, I just don't know which half. And I feel like it's that way in our lives sometimes. Half of the stuff that we do is working. We just don't know which half, so we end up doing everything. It's kind of like throwing everything against the wall, and we'll just see what sticks. Analyze. Pretend like you're a scientist in your own life. Analyze your life and find out what helps me achieve the goals that I want to achieve. You're probably doing some things that are simply time wasters. I know in my own life, I found that. I was doing things just because I'd always done them that way, things that weren't very efficient or effective. So ask yourself and analyze the work that you do every day. You may say, well, I don't even know what I do every day. And most people can say that. So I recommend, at least for a short term, tracking your day to day. I started this and I thought I'd do it for a pretty short period of time and ended up doing it for almost 5 years. In fact, I kept my old planners just so I can go back and look at them sometime. But I tracked every single day in 15-minute increments. And I learned a couple of things. A couple of things shocked me to no end. Number one was, man, I task switched a lot. And I bet you'll find that you do the same thing. We like to tell ourselves that we can multitask. We really can't. Humans do not multitask well. What we do is task switch. We'll jump from one task to another. The problem is that is very inefficient, and we lose a lot of time and a lot of productivity by jumping from one task to another. You're much better off if you can start a task and work on it until you finish it. But start with this planner. Put yourself, basically break your day up into these 15-minute increments and watch what you do. Another thing you'll probably surprise yourself with is the number of times you check email. I'm again shocked at the amount of times I catch myself checking email or my clients checking email. 44. That is the average number of times a person checks their email in a single day. Most people check their email 44 times a day. That is unnecessary. That is ridiculous. Most productivity experts say that you should check your email never first thing in the morning. Your first time should be around 10 or 11, and then check it around 2 in the afternoon, and check it again around 5 p.m. when you're going home. So check it about 3 times a day. That is what most productivity experts recommend. Most people now realize that it's kind of email etiquette to reply within 24 hours. So waiting till your next, 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. or 5 p.m. to send an important email or check an email, in most cases, there will be no negative repercussions from that. So use your best judgment, but you're probably checking email a lot more than you think you are. But you won't know until you track it. So even if you don't commit to doing this for 5 years, just do it for a week or two. You will find that your days don't quite run themselves the way that they thought. In fact, one of my favorite old sayings, either you run your day or your day runs you. And by doing this, you'll find out that in most cases, your days are probably running you. If you don't like paper, there's plenty of software out there to help. I know in my previous business, I had some time and billing software that we required everyone to use. So if you've already got some software, use it. Most software applications now have mobile apps, so you can use them on your desktops, your laptops, your tablets, your phones. So there's no excuse for not tracking what you're doing. Again, at least for a short term, to determine what we need to do and what we don't need to do. Next, after we have that list of the things that we're doing, what do we do with it? Well, this is a great tool called the Eisenhower box. Dwight Eisenhower put this together when he was president of the United States. He was one of the most productive presidents we had at that time, up to that time. And you can literally just draw this on a piece of paper, but 4 quadrants. And the top quadrant, top left, is kind of urgent and important. These are your fires. These are where you're literally running the office and you're putting out fires. To the right, the top right quadrant is not urgent but important. This is where we really want to live. Stephen Covey popularized this. He called it your Q2, your quadrant 2 time. This is where we want to live. And by establishing and setting good business goals, we will spend more time. Like I tell clients, I'm like, we want to spend our rock time in Q2. In other words, put as many goals and rocks as we can into our quadrant 2 efforts, because we're preventing fires. The more time we spend in quadrant 2, we're reducing the number of fires that'll pop up in the urgent and important quadrant. So we want to live in Q2 as much as possible. The bottom left quadrant, urgent and not important, well, that's stuff that you can delegate. Can we get somebody else to do that work? The answer is probably yes. And then the bottom right, not urgent and not important. Then why are we even doing it? For years I did a printed newsletter because I'd always done it that way. And one day I decided I would start measuring my results. And I found a company that would give me dedicated phone numbers. So I bought a dedicated phone number, and the only place I put it was at the top of my printed newsletter. And this company would track every phone call that came in. They would record the call so I could go back and check it for quality later. And so for a year, for 12 months, I printed my long newsletter, beautiful newsletter, wrote articles, photos, surveys, everything you could imagine, trivia on the back. I did this for a year, every month, publishing this newsletter. I had it printed, paid people to stuff envelopes, put stamps, mail it. I mean, quite a bit of money. Guess how many people had called that number at the end of that year? 0. Not a single person had called that number at the end of the year. So again, it turned out to be not important and not urgent. It was one of these things that I could say, well, why do I need to be doing this at all? And so I simply stopped doing it. So ask yourself, am I doing things that are not urgent and not important? Another great tool that we can use when we're talking about where we spend our time is a program called Rescue Time. And with Rescue Time, it's an application you install on your computer, and it basically just watches in the background and monitors what's going on. And then it categorizes that For example, it may see social media as entertainment and maybe Outlook as business or productivity. And it categorizes how you spend your time. Now, of course, you can customize it. If, for example, it normally categorized social media as entertainment, but yet you are a social media manager, you can change it so that it categorizes social media as work or business or productivity. But that's a general idea. At the end of every week, it will give you basically a productivity score 0 to 100, and you can see how you're doing. I used this for years. It was free, and it was beautiful. It would literally kind of give you a weekly summary of how productive you were for that week. And so I installed it on my desktop and my laptop, and it worked very well. So if you're into some software to help kind of determine how you're spending your time, this is a good way to do it. I found that when I started this, I was in Outlook about 6 hours a day. 6 hours a day. So as I got better at my job and better at being more productive, I realized close Outlook. Turn off notifications. Turn off noises and sounds and pop-ups and close it. Check your email in the morning at, say, 11 o'clock and close it. Don't leave it running in the background. And that's what I was doing. So by doing that, it's always kind of hanging around and you get pop-ups and notifications, and again, not ideal for focused work. So this rescue time. Another great tool I used was Kanban. Kanban, its roots are kind of back in Agile, which gets its, I guess, start back in the 1940s or 50s when we sent some of the best productivity and process experts in the United States over to Japan. And out of that, Agile came Kanban, and it's kind of a way to just track, what are you doing? So I did this the old school way with a giant whiteboard and a bunch of sticky notes, and I kind of did a brain dump of everything I needed to get done, and that was my backlog. And so you have your backlog of all the work you need to do, all the tasks. Then you have your work in progress section. So you would write on a sticky, you would write the backlog. So you'd write each of these tasks you need to do, and then you'd move work in progress over, and you can never have more than 3 things work in progress at a time. If you hit a bump or you hit a roadblock and you need to wait on something, move that over into waiting, and then when you're finally done, move that sticky over into done. And so I would do this in every single week. At the end of the week on Friday, I would remove everything off my done side and start clean on Monday morning with an empty done side. So it was really nice to see how productive you were. And I took a picture of these every week so I could kind of track my productivity. And it was really cool. So if you're a kind of a more manual person, you like to visually see this, check out Kanban. If you want to find some software to help you do that, check out Trello. Trello is basically a software version of Kanban. You have the boards and you can move tasks back and forth between it. So check out Trello if you like the idea of Kanban, but you don't want to buy 1,000 sticky notes. Another thing, if you do not have an admin assistant, ask yourself, should I get an admin assistant? The answer will probably surprise you. You can find great assistants all over the country, all over the world now. Websites such as Upwork make it easy to hire assistants in the United States or anywhere in the world. You can find an assistant in Bangladesh for $5 an hour. You can find an assistant in New York City for a little bit more than that. You can find an assistant anywhere in between. So you can find assistants that are local that can help you get tasks done, virtual assistants, things like checking your email, running errands, posting on social media. You can find assistants to help with just about anything. So think about that. Remember our Eisenhower box, there's that delegate section. Ask yourself, how much of my work could I delegate to an assistant? So think about that. The next tactic is don't waste drive time. We spend a lot of time in our cars. In fact, I used to commute about 20 minutes one way every day. So that meant 40 minutes a day, which was about 200 minutes a week. That's over 3 hours, and the average business book is about 3 hours long. So you can listen to about a book a week on Audible if you have a commute similar to mine. If your commute's longer, you can listen to more than that. But that means you can listen to 52 books a year in the time that you're already spending driving. So don't waste that time. You can learn a foreign language. You can learn about self-improvement, about productivity. You can learn just about anything with books on Audible. So check out Audible if you're not in the habit of listening to books. Here's another tip. Sometimes I noticed that my mind would drift. I would listen to a book, and then a few minutes later I realized my mind had been drifting and I didn't hear the last few minutes. You can speed it up. So 1.5 times normal play, or twice the speed of a normal reader. And so that the book is read back to you faster. And what I found was about 1.25 or 1.5 times normal speed was good for me, because it was fast enough to keep my mind engaged. So if you're the kind of person that doesn't focus when they read or listen to a book and your mind wanders because it's not moving fast enough for you, you can speed up Audible so that it will keep you more interested. So I love listening to books now when I travel, when I drive, even when I'm on the lawnmower cutting grass. I'll throw in a good book and it's on. So don't waste your drive time. The next, one of my mentors always talked about golden comb time. So she was a very successful business owner. She was also into physical fitness, and she was an aerobics instructor. So she would go teach an aerobics class most weekday mornings and then come to the office, and her day would be off to the races. And she noticed that she got interrupted so many times. And one day, out of frustration, she looked down and realized she had brought her gym bag into her office. And in her aerobics class, she used these orange cones. So out of frustration, she grabbed an orange cone and stuck it outside her door, because even with her door closed, people would interrupt her. But amazingly enough, when the orange cone was out there, nobody interrupted her that day. And so she realized she had hit on a little secret. If she would simply start putting a cone outside her door, people knew that was her private time, that's her focus time, and that's when she was not to be bothered. And so consider that. So much of our work is shallow work, and we're stuck in this very shallow work. When we get down into deep, meaningful, deep work, we've got to have the ability to focus without interruption. And if you're in a position where you're interrupted a lot, try the golden cone. Same point, distractions, block them out. I was working with a team recently. They were getting ready to fire one of their employees because the person they didn't feel was really doing their job well. So we interviewed that person, we met with them and started talking. And it turns out her office was the first one you see when you walked in the building. She had been there for a long time, so she kind of had a lot of institutional knowledge. People were always stopping by, chatting, saying hi, asking questions. And even though she was polite and tried to ask them to leave or not stop by, it just never seemed to work. And so she was literally about to get fired. They decided to let's start brainstorming ways that we could help her be more productive and to block out some of these distractions. And it boiled down to a simple set of Bose noise canceling headphones. We explained to the office that she needed to focus, and when she had her headphones on, don't bother her. They blocked out a lot of the background noise, and people could see that she had them on from outside of her office. They could look in the window. And a simple, $250 set of headphones saved her job, and from an employer standpoint, saved them the headache and hassle of trying to replace a otherwise good employee. So is there any way to block out distractions? This works great on airplanes too. There have been some studies done that have shown that for every hour on an airplane, you can get about 3 hours worth of real work done. So if you're in an airplane for 3 hours, you can get about 9 hours of real work done because the distractions aren't there. So grab you a set of noise canceling headphones the next time you're getting ready to fly out, and you'll be shocked at how much work you can get done. Another great tool, this is Warren Buffett, the richest man in the world. And two things here. The first is Warren's got a saying that I love. He says, listen, yes is very expensive. You have to know when to say no. So it's a filter. So back to our VTO, our Vision Traction Organizer, we have our core focus. What do we do better than anyone else? What does our company do? We can use that as a filter to know what to say yes to, and more importantly, what to say no to. I say that as companies become more successful, you're much more likely to die of indigestion than starvation, meaning you're going to have lots of opportunities, and you have to know when to say no. So the first Warren Buffett point is know when to say no, and you'll be saying no a lot more than you're saying yes, so get ready for that. We've got to focus on the single most important thing in each area of our life, and we've got to say no to everything else. The second Warren Buffett point is, Warren had a pilot, and this was not just your regular pilot. Obviously, he's Warren Buffett, so he could afford a pretty good pilot. His private jet pilot, had literally flown for presidents. This guy knew what he was doing. So pretty successful in his own right. But of course, he was flying Warren Buffett around. So one day he said, I don't want to lose this opportunity. I'm sitting with the wealthiest man in the world. Let me ask him if he's got any tips for me. So when he had his chance, he talked to Warren, and he's like, Mr. Buffett, could you give me some tips, some tips to get more out of life, to reach my goals, to be more productive? And Warren Buffett said, sure. He said, so what I want you to do is write down the most important things that you want to accomplish in your life, over the next 20 years. Just pick a long time frame. What are the most important goals you want to achieve? And think about it. Don't do it quickly. Think about this. And then when we meet the next time, have your list ready. We'll discuss it. So some time went by. The pilot did exactly what Mr. Warren Buffett said. He put some time into this, put some real thought into it, and made a list. I think he had about 20 items on his list. And so when he came back to see Warren the next time when he was flying him, he said, hey, I've got my list. He's like, great. Show me your list. So he broke out his list, his long list, and Warren Buffett said, circle the top 3 items. So he did circle 1, 2, and 3. And he said, what do you think those 3 are? I said, oh, well, those are my top 3 most important. I'm guessing that's what I work on first. Warren Buffett said, yep, you're right. What do you think the rest of the items on that list are? He's like, well, I guess those are my secondary goals, things that they're important, but not quite as important. So I'll just work on them when I have time. And Warren Buffett stopped him and said, no. That is your not to-do list. That is the list of things you do not do because they will be distractions away from your most important 3. He said, so I want you to work on your top 3 and nothing else until you achieve those top 3. Don't think about the other items on your list because they're just distractions right now. After you finish 1, 2, and 3, we can look at the next 3 items on the list. But do not think of all these things as equal because you cannot work on all these and you'll just be distracted. So come up with your own not to-do list, things that you do not want to do because they can distract you. So think about that. Great points from Warren Buffett. Next, we're going to talk about Pomodoro. So Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato. And this simple tactic, simple strategy was created some years ago by a couple gentlemen. They realized that they, when they really got their head down and started working hard, they could focus for a period of time, but then they would start kind of getting distracted and losing energy. And one of them grabbed a timer. And it just so happened they grabbed a timer that was in the shape of a tomato, a cooking timer. And they used that to time themselves. And that's why they started calling their technique the Pomodoro technique. And the idea is that we can't multitask. We can only work on one thing at a time. So when you get to the office in the morning, pick your most important one task and set your timer for 25 minutes and start working on it. And don't do anything else. Don't go to the bathroom. Don't take a break. Don't check email. Don't do anything in that 25 minutes except work on your single task. At the end of that 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. So that 30-minute block of time is called one Pomodoro. Do that and watch how many Pomodoros you can accomplish in a day. Most people, when they start, they're lucky to get through 1. Even very productive people can only get through 5 or 6 a day because hard focus energy like that, it's a little bit draining, but you will get so much accomplished, you will be shocked. So the Pomodoro technique is a very good technique to use. If you don't want to go out and look for a tomato-shaped timer, there's some great apps now you can use that you can get on a phone or a tablet. So check this out if you want to know more about the Pomodoro technique. Next, let's talk about perfectionism. There was a time in my life where I felt like if it wasn't perfect, I couldn't deliver it, I couldn't discuss it, I couldn't talk about it. Everything had to be perfect. And I'll say now I'm a recovering perfectionist. I've learned a lot. And one of the things I've learned is exactly that, perfect is the enemy of the good. We've got to get a good product. We've got to get a good delivery, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So think about that. If you're one of these perfectionists that everything has to be exactly perfect before you roll it out to the market. There was a point in my life I was getting ready to roll out a new product, and I spent dozens and dozens and dozens of hours and thousands of dollars to get this thing rolled out, and 2 people paid for it. And it ended up, at the end of the day, it was not very successful. I ended up pulling the plug on it and refunding people's money because it just wasn't successful. And I had wasted thousands of dollars and thousands of dollars and hours of time on something that wasn't needed. I could have created a minimum viable product, something that would have been good enough to launch to see what kind of interest was there before I committed the time and the resources for my full-blown product. So shame on me. Hopefully you can learn from my lesson and realize it doesn't have to be perfect before you launch it. The next, use your Outlook calendar. the trend today, successful people seem to be moving a little bit more away from to-do list and a little bit more towards time blocking. So with to-do list, we're just keeping track of what we need to do and what we've already done for the day. And there's some benefit to that. But time blocking is really valuable because normally if we're just reactive all day, we're putting out fires. We don't spend the time to work on our big ticket items, our goals. So right now, pick a time next week. Pick one day of the week and pick one out. If your slowest time at work is Thursday mornings at 8 a.m., then block from 8 to 9 a.m. next Thursday to work on your number one biggest goal. And do that for a week or 2, 3 weeks. After you do that, you'll see how much progress you're making and pick another hour. And eventually you'll get to the point where you're blocking more and more of your time to work on the important things in your day. And trust me, life will get better. You'll make much more progress on your long-term goals. By being proactive, you'll reduce the amount of reactivity that you have in your life. So time blocking, check out time blocking if you haven't already. We mentioned email. Like I said, don't check it first thing in the morning. Check it only a couple of times a day. I used to roll out of my bed, and before my feet hit the floor, I already had email open. Don't do that. It just starts off your day on the wrong foot. Do not check it first thing in the morning. Do not check it last thing before you go to bed. And when you're in Outlook, turn off notifications. That sound notifications, pop-ups, turn those things off. You do not need social media. Turn off all the. So now internet browsers have the ability to give you pop-ups. Turn those things off. You don't want pop-ups from social media or from any other sites. So turn off all those pop-ups. Another thing, while we're on the subject of email, use your quick steps, use your rules. Personally, I use them a lot. I used to keep very detailed folders for everything. Like you could go back, I had hundreds and hundreds of folders. If you were to email me, say you were a client, I would think, okay, this is the year and this is my client folder, and I'd open that and see all my list of clients alphabetically, and I'd find you. It would literally take me 10, 20, 30 seconds just to find the right folder to move your email into it if I wanted to save it. Listen, Outlook now is so much smarter. It's much more efficient at searching. So now I have one giant archive folder. And if I want to save your email, I just click an archive button at the top. It automatically moves it to my archive folder and it marks it as read. And so that one quick step button does a couple of tasks. So if you're not familiar with Outlook quick steps, check it out. You can set quick steps up to do just about anything. Move them into different folders, forward emails, delete them. You can create rules to help with some of this. So check out Outlook rules and Outlook quick steps if you don't use those already. Another great Outlook tool is delay delivery. There have been some times where it feels like I'm going back and forth with people 10 times a day on an email thread. When you type an email, you can delay that delivery. Say it's 4 o'clock and you're getting ready to work on something and you don't want to be interrupted for the next hour. Don't send the email right now. Press delay delivery and schedule it to go out at 5:15 p.m. when you're already done with your focused work. So use delay delivery if you're not doing that. And that comes back to drafts also. If you have emails that you send out all the time that are very similar, consider saving a template as a draft. And then whenever you need to send that message, just open the draft and you can copy the content. So you can save yourself some time there if you use email drafts. I mentioned earlier my archives. With archives, again, don't save everything in individual folders. I had that problem for a long time. It is definitely time consuming. Dumping everything into an archive folder works well for 98% of the population. So if you can save everything into a single archive folder, your life will be a little bit easier. Another great tool, and Outlook has tried to do this with Clutter. Clutter is the Microsoft version of this email sorting, but I'll tell you, the company that I've seen that does it best is a company called SaneBox. And what SaneBox does, I think it's about $5 a month. I've used it for years. Basically, it sorts your email before you get it. So your email is filtered through SaneBox before it hits Outlook, and SaneBox drops a couple of extra folders in Outlook. One of those is called Sane Later. So any email that you get that it considers as important but not urgent, say it's a newsletter or a catalog from J. Crew, it will dump that into a Sane Later folder, not deleting it, but letting you know it's not urgent right now. You can check it out later, kind of like a read later folder. There's also a great folder called Sane 7 Days or Sane Next Week. Anything you dump into that folder, it'll save it and send it to you again a week from now. So if you see something and you say, hey, I need to address that, but not right now, drop it into Sane 7 Days. It'll come back to you in a week. You can also have a folder called Sane Black Hole. I love that one. Any message you drop into Sane Black Hole, you'll never get a message from that sender again. So Sane Black Hole, I used it a lot as well. So check out SaneBox if you haven't already. I mentioned earlier with Warren Buffett, just say no. Maybe the 3 most important words for productivity: knowing what to say no to and knowing what to say yes to. You got to say no more than you say yes to be successful. Then ultimately talking about kind of end of day routines. You know, as we kind of wrap up our days, we have our end of day routines. Much like our morning routines, end of day routines are very important. You need those at least 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep a night. If you're not sure how much sleep you need each night, experiment. Start off with 8, sleep 8 hours for a couple nights, see how you feel. Try it with 7, try it with 6, see how you feel. If you have to wake up and guzzle coffee to get your day started, you probably need more sleep than that. So practice and see what you need. Also, it's been found that most mobile devices, things like tablets and laptops and iPads and iPhones, they generate enough of that blue light to kind of keep your brain stimulated. Most experts say you shouldn't be using mobile devices within an hour of bedtime. So especially for your children, make sure you or your children are not on the mobile devices before you go to sleep, especially if you have any trouble sleeping. So, kind of have a nighttime, whatever your routine is, create a nighttime routine. Reading from a paper book. I know they still make paperback books. Reading from a real hard book is valuable. It kind of naturally helps most people kind of start relaxing and winding down and slowing down to sleep. So whatever your end of day routine is, create it and stick to it. Another thing, once you find out what you need to do, don't procrastinate. Let's do it. Let's just jump in and do it. An exercise I like to go through with people who may be bad at procrastinating, and there was a time in my life that I was a pretty bad procrastinator. I would say, okay, I want to hire you. I've got a project coming up. It will take 31 days to complete. So about a month-long project, and I want to hire you to do my project. But here's the kicker. I want to pay you a penny the first day, and I'll double your pay every day. So I'll pay you 1 penny the first day, and I'll pay you 2 cents the second day, and then the third day I'll pay you 4 cents. So every day I'll double your pay. Would you take the job? And so I'm asking you now, if I want to hire you for this project, would you take the job? This 1 month long project. The work's not bad. You can do the work. It's not your favorite job in the world, but you can do this for 30 days or 31 days. Would you take the job? So most people say no. I wouldn't take the job, Ryan. I'd be crazy to take that job. I wouldn't make any money. Well, if you would have said yes, you would have made $21 million. I know you say, are you sure? Look at my math here. If you don't trust me, double check my math. You would have made $21 million. So there's a couple of lessons we can learn here. The first is compounding interest, the obvious one. It's amazing how much compound interest makes a massive change in things like money over time. So this goes back to investing. If you're not saving money, start saving money. If you can save $1 when you're 20 years old, it's worth like $7 or $8 by the time you're 50. So save money as early as you can. But that's an obvious one. But a second point here to our point about time management is procrastination. If you say, Ryan, this sounds like a great deal. I want to take this job, but I can't start until tomorrow. Well, if you only work 30 days instead of 31, you're not losing the first day's penny. You're not making 1 penny less. You're losing the last day's value. You're losing over $10 million. That means if you procrastinate 1 day, you're not making $21 million. You're making $10 million because you're knocking out the last day. So when you procrastinate today in your life, don't think about it as I'm losing value of a today's day. Think about the productivity you're losing in the long run. A year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, you should be earning twice, 3 times, 10 times, even maybe 100 times what you're earning now. So when you procrastinate, you're putting that off. So whatever you do, don't procrastinate. If something's important enough to do it, let's do it now. Let's do it as fast as we can. So do not procrastinate. Another great point, this is one of my favorite quotes from Jim Rohn. It said, everyone must choose one of 2 pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. When I was in college, I minored in exercise physiology, and I had an instructor, and we'd meet at the gym, and she was brutal. She was great. She was brutal. And it was kind of one of her things. She said, you can wake up a little bit sore every day for the rest of your life and be in great health and feel good, and you can be 75 years old, still coming into the gym, exercising, feeling good. Or You can put this off and not feel an ounce of pain now, and in 20 years, you'll be in so much pain you almost can't function. So it's kind of goes back to that point. A little bit of discipline now, a little bit of pain of discipline right now will save you a lot of regret, a lot of heartache, a lot of pain down the road. So one of my favorite Jim Rohn quotes. In fact, this is such a good quote. I have it as the wallpaper on my phone, so I see this literally every day. As we wrap up here, some recommendations, some book recommendations. Obviously, some of my favorite, especially as it comes to getting things done, things like Get a Grip, The Miracle Morning. Getting Things Done by David Allen is kind of one of the classics. The Perfect Day Formula. Deep Work is a great one by Cal Newport. Eat That Frog, and then Time Management Made Simple. So if you haven't read any of these, I strongly recommend them. And then, of course, if you have any questions, reach out. You can email me. If you haven't joined my Facebook group, feel free to join the Facebook group. We have questions like this come up all the time. So if you want to know, how can I get more out of my day? How can I become more productive? How can I run my day so my day doesn't run me? That's a great forum to ask them. So I hope this helped, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you.